Hi, this is Giovanna with Comprehensive Grant Management. Thank you for tuning into this week's part 2 video, which focuses on YouthBuild's budget narrative, which is part of 3 narratives that you will have to complete for the YouthBuild grant due February 1st, 2024. Now, know that the funding amount allocated to this type of grant is from $700,000 to the max award of $1.5 million. And as in all grant federal funds, you will have to complete the mandatory SF 424A form, which is essentially the cover sheet to the grant application that synthesizes all of the program needs or proposed outcomes, including the relevant budget information that is going to go into your budget narrative. The budget narrative is going to reflect all of that information that I believe is in section B of the SF 424A form. Now know that the budget must ensure full transparency and accountability of all the expenses. So that means when you start writing that you summarize each section accordingly and then detail the line items with the amounts per respective years underneath the summary of each area, which I'll go into in a little bit. Now, remember when you're developing the budget narrative that it must factor in a 40-month period of performance, which anticipated, let me do that again. Now, remember when developing your budget narrative that you must factor in the 40-month performance period, which begins June 3rd, 2024. Note that the grant funds that are awarded are expected to be used in its full entirety during the time of the grant period. The YouthBuild grant requires the YouthBuild grant requires cost and the YouthBuild grant the YouthBuild program requires cost sharing and matching funds. These may be in the form of cash or in-kind contributions and must equal 25% of the total funding ask in the application. So, for example, if you're asking for $700,000, you would need to have matching funds in $175,000. Or if you're asking for $1.5 million in funding for your program, you would need to have $375,000. Any resources or funding contributing to the project in addition to the cost sharing or matching funds will be considered leveraged resources, which actually helps in your application review process. Now know that YouthBuild has statutory requirements for the active and follow-up periods that include a planning period of 4 months to complete the planning milestones, followed by 2 years of the active program of services, which includes the active program time. This is when the education or occupational skills training or youth leadership development activities are occurring for one or more of the participants in your cohort. And then there is an additional 12-month follow-up support services and tracking of the participants' outcome of each cohort in your application. Now, know that for the follow-up, you need at least a minimum of 5% of the total budget that you're asking for to be reserved for that 12-month follow-up period. Also, know that the budget narrative must not, let me do that again. Also know that the budget narrative must sufficiently demonstrate that the cost per participant does not exceed $23,000. And how you calculate this is based on the Department of Labor, which calculates the expected cost per participant based on the grant award and the number of participants the grant expects to enroll. Note that for YouthBuild construction costs, because YouthBuild programs offer construction training, applicants must show applicable construction training costs in either the supplies or other or contractual lines in the budget, or where you feel in those 3 sections where appropriate. So you're going to start putting together your budget narrative. You're going to use the SF 424A form and section B of that form, and then mirror the information there, but in greater detail in your narrative. For example, in the personnel section, let me just go over the main sections of this budget. You're going to have the personnel, the fringe benefits, travel, equipment, supplies, contractual, other, and indirect charges. Know that for construction plus applicants must show costs in the budget narrative or match narrative supporting construction plus component in the program. Each category above must be in detailed. Actually, delete that section, each category, please. Not that. So for the applicant, sorry, for the editor, thank you. There's a lot of noise behind me. I don't know if you're catching it. So it's been so distracting to tape this. Okay, so let me continue. So basically, in your budget narrative, what you're going to start is with the total request of your program, the total number of participants, and begin with a summary of your overall program. Then you're going to continue with each section of your line items with a brief summary of what each section is going to fund. For example, your personnel, you're going to list all of your staff positions, and you're going to include them by title of employment, including their roles and responsibilities. And you will include in this section the annual salary, the percentage of time that they will be working on the project, and for example, as follows: the personnel costs, you're going to have the summary of the personnel costs, and then by the role, then you'll have, for example, for the project manager, the annual salary costs broken by 3 years with an increase of each year, and then the case manager, and then the job developer with annual costs. You will have also the fringe benefits, which includes a breakdown of the amounts of percentages that comprise the fringe benefit costs, such as health insurance, FICA, retirement, and so forth. For travel, you will do the same thing. And for the purpose of travel, which is allowable for including mileage, estimated number of in-state and out-state trips, and estimated costs per each travel. Equipment. For the equipment section, identify each item of equipment you expect to purchase that has it must be an estimated cost of over $5,000. Anything under that is not considered equipment, but more of just, sorry, let me do that again. For equipment, identify each item of equipment you expect to purchase that costs over $5,000 per unit, and then list each one accordingly. Note that items that with a unit cost of less than $5,000 are not considered equipment, so you wouldn't be entering them in that section. You would then go into supplies, construction, and other. And note that for indirect costs, if you have a negotiated indirect cost rate approved, let me try that again. For indirect costs, know that if you intend to claim indirect costs using the 10% de minimis rate, please confirm that your organization meets the requirements as described in the NOA. So in summary, when preparing your budget narrative, the following are points that you need to have in consideration. One, you are going to be working with the SF 424A form and aligning those budget items in your narrative accordingly, and just going into more detail with a summary of each section preceding the detailed amount of the line item. And so you're looking at a budget between 700,000 to 1.5 million for a 40-month term, which begins June 3rd, 2024. Matching, the matching grant funds need to equal 25% of the total federal amount being asked, which translates into 175,000 for 700,000 or 375,000 for 1.5 million. The minimum of 5% needs to be allocated of the total funds asked for the 12-month follow-up period. The budget narrative must sufficiently demonstrate that the cost per participant does not exceed $23,000. Personnel costs that are for your three main hires, such as the project manager, case manager, or job developer, can include a $2,000 annual increase for all staff who perform exceedingly well within their position. Equipment estimated cost must be of those that are over $5,000 per item, and each item must be accounted for in a list form, including how much each one cost. And of course, if you have indirect costs, they must be approved based on a 10% de minimis rate, and just make sure to have approval. And I hope this video helped you with how to prepare your budget narrative for the YouthBuild application that is due February 1st, 2024. And for the person editing this, thank you. This is probably this is a difficult video for me today. There was so much noise everywhere. I had to do this over and over and over again, and it's quite detailed. So thank you for making me look decent, and have a wonderful day.